Oh, number five's a good one. Number five is a good one. Number five. Man, if there's one thing, that switch I was talking about before, if there was one switch I could ask for and turn on, it would be number five, because it would save student pilots so much time, money, and frustration, and just unnecessary stuff. So here we go, number five. It goes like this. Develop a solid relationship with less than ideal performance. I'll say it again. I want you to cultivate a beautiful, warm, friendly, healthy relationship with less than ideal performance. So what do I mean when it comes to flight training? There's two types of student pilots. I'll just draw them out right now to give you an example, to make a distinction. The first type of student pilot, they both started the same day for the sake of this conversation. And now they're both a month in, and they're both learning how to land. The first student pilot figured out how to land, landed, got all excited, and then showed up 4 days later for another lesson and just can't figure out how to land. Meaning it's the classic 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. And that student pilot is sitting there in the plane. The lesson is not over, and they're beating themselves up internally, not externally, not loud. It's just in their own brain. They are not nice to themselves. The other student pilot understands that they're human, understands how the process of learning anything works, understands the concepts of 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. And even though they figured out how to land a plane 4 days ago, they understand that by landing a plane once, it doesn't mean I now am a pro airplane lander. And it doesn't mean that I won't ever again have a not the prettiest landing. And because the student understands all these things, when they botched that landing 4 days later, their brain is reminded of all these pieces of information. Okay, the fact that you landed 4 days ago doesn't mean you're a pro. It takes time, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. Just keep at it. You're doing great. You're moving forward. And as a result of that, they beat themselves up less, if at all, in comparison to the first student. And if I asked you, what's the difference between these two students? Here's 2 people who started the same day. Again, hypothetically, landed the same day. Let's say 3 weeks in, they both landed a plane. And then 4 days later, they both had a lesson, and they both messed up that landing. One's completely beating themselves up, and the other is like, hey, I'll get it next time. What's the difference between these 2 people? So while there's probably many differences, I could tell you for certain, as someone who sat next to a bunch of different types of student pilots who had different temperaments and whatever you want to call it, I could tell you the one thing that I've found to be true every single time that's different, the difference between these student pilots, is their own relationship with their own less than ideal performance. The student pilots who beat themselves up and are hard on themselves could be great people. They could have great relationships in life with people around them. Absolutely nothing to do with what we're talking about. But there's one specific type of relationship that they never figured out. Oftentimes, they don't even know exists. Maybe you're watching this right now and you never thought to yourself that it's in your control to develop a great relationship with your own less than ideal performance, or your own mishaps or mistakes, or whatever you want to name it. Maybe you never knew that it's a type of relationship you could cultivate. So here I am telling you, not only is it, but it's a vital one that you do. The faster, the better when it comes to flight training, because it will be a miserable journey if your relationship with bad performance with yourself is not so great. Now, an easy way to bring this alive for you, so you understand, basically a way for me to inflate what I just said, is let's imagine that this relationship I'm talking about is not with yourself. Let's imagine it's with your instructor who's sitting next to you. And let's imagine every time you had less than ideal performance, your instructor beat you up. Not physically, but just berated you and yelled at you, or all the things that you do with yourself in your own brain. Let's imagine they were doing to you. I want you to imagine how pleasant your flight training experience would be. How much would you look forward to showing up to the next lesson? Well, I could tell you, if you did show up, which I probably wouldn't, I'd look for a different instructor. But if you did show up, your motivation to show up would be very, very low, if at all. But if you think about it, you're doing the same thing to yourself, assuming you don't yet have a good, solid relationship with your less than ideal performance. You're doing the same thing to yourself every single time, maybe 5 times a flight. And you just keep taking it. You just keep taking it. You keep taking it. You keep allowing yourself to beat you up when you don't do something to perfection. Now, I could talk about this for days, but in the name of wrapping this up, here's how understanding this will save you money. The thing that happens in the plane in a lesson, it could be on the ground, but in the plane especially, because there's so much going on and it's busy. The thing that happens in the plane when a student starts beating themselves up is, and I'm talking now with my CFI hat on, the moment a student falls into that trap, learning begins to decrease in the flight deck. Learning does not exist. Learning cannot exist in an environment in which someone is beating themselves up and there's an enormous amount of frustration because the student is completely distracted with themselves. Okay, they're completely consumed with the crosswind landing that they did not perfectly handle. So learning diminishes to probably 0 sometimes. There's very little room for the brain to take things on. I want you to think of learning like fire. Learning is fire. Fire could only exist where there's oxygen. Learning could only exist where there is oxygen for learning. So what is oxygen for learning? Well, that's a student who feels calm, happy, excited, rested, fed, and all these other positive things, you could name it. And you could probably imagine, oh yeah, when I'm feeling those things, I learn better. You think? Yeah, you do. Or to the contrary, when you're not feeling those things, you don't learn much. It's just the way humans work. This has nothing to do with airplanes. So from a CFI perspective, if the student hasn't developed a solid relationship with less than ideal performance, and they beat themselves up 5 times a flight or 1 time a flight, now they're blowing money while no learning is taking place. They might as well stay home because the learning has no oxygen. The more you understand this, the kinder you could be to yourself when it comes to, flight training is like learning a language. Imagine you started learning a new language. I'll use me for an example so it's not personal. Imagine I started learning a new language. I don't know, Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. Imagine I started learning a new language, Spanish. And a week in, 2 weeks in, I had a conversation with a Spanish-speaking person. And I just messed a certain sentence up. I said it all backwards and upside down, and I got it wrong. Imagine me beating myself up over it. Like, that's literally what happens when student pilots show up to training and beat themselves up over stuff. There's no room for it. There's no need for it. Your instructor doesn't want you to. Now, again, this entire number 5 thing we're talking about here is strictly your relationship with your less than ideal performance. I'm not even talking about your instructor's relationship with your less than ideal performance, because that should be phenomenal. Your instructor's relationship with your less than ideal performance should be excellent. And if it's not, get a new instructor, right? Because you're paying this person to exercise compassion and patience and kindness and to motivate you to keep doing better. You're paying them. You could argue, hey, I'm not paying myself. You're right. But you should still be kind to yourself. So I'm not even talking about your instructor. Hopefully your instructor's relationship with your less than ideal performance is excellent. And if it's not, get a new instructor. I'm talking about your relationship with your less than ideal performance. You gotta develop it. You have to be aware of it. You have to feed it. You have to be kind to yourself. You have to understand that training is a process. It takes time to become good at anything. And remember, when you beat yourself up, learning stops happening. And at that point, you're wasting money, you're wasting avgas, you're wasting fuel, you're putting time on the airplane for what? For nothing. You're not learning anything. I want you to have a great relationship with your mishaps, which is why in the videos, when you watch my videos with my students, right, I always say good learning. Everything's good learning. I don't care what happened, it's good learning. Listen, unless we're dead or in a coma, we could learn stuff from what we do. Now, this is not a green light to go crazy and do things you shouldn't do. But mistakes happen. We're not perfect. But it's up to us to walk away from anything. If it's a bad landing, if it's a crosswind that wasn't handled right, it's up to us to choose, am I going to learn from it? Or am I just going to beat myself up over it? It's completely up to you. Completely up to you. So I want you to develop a solid relationship with your not so pretty work. Okay, that's another way to put it. And the better this relationship of yours with yourself is and becomes, you'd be amazed. Your flight training experience will transform because you're minimizing the amount of time in the flight deck where learning is not happening. And now you're letting learning to happen for the entire lesson or for the majority of it. Okay? And that's kind of the idea with that. There we have it. Those are my five ways to save money while flight training. Again, like I said in the beginning, there's a million ways. I don't specifically know of on top of my head. I'm sure there's a book out there that says 30 ways to save money in flight training, and they're all true, probably. These are the 5 I find that student pilots miss for some reason. Maybe no one ever talked to them about it. Maybe no one ever discussed this with them. And oftentimes it is what it is. People show up for flight training and the instructor, many instructors think that I'm just here to teach you how to land. I'm not here to teach you mindset. I'm a big mindset guy. I'm not here to teach you how to think of things, right? You're not paying me enough for any of that. I just want to teach you how to land and go home. And the student is filled and left with an enormous amount of frustration. And sometimes they're lost, right? And it's unfortunate. It's sad. I'm not here to blame instructors or anyone, but mindset is everything in most things in life, not just flight training. And so the better my students' mindset could be, the more successful they are. And I've seen it time and time again. And if I could help them with that, then heck, hopefully this is helpful to you.